Excursus 7. Spectral analysis of stupidity. Quoting Charles Richet, 1921, "We are all the more stupid in our actions, the less ignorant we are." With the emergence of impostors' ambivalences in modernity, the social economy of intelligence is altered. Almost imperceptibly, but nonetheless dramatically, the relation between intelligence and stupidity is displaced. Stupidity loses its apparent simplicity. In it, one no longer recognizes a primary state of unenlightened minds, but a complicated phenomenon that in itself is many-sided, indeed downright exciting. As soon as one has taken on the social psychology of deception, stupidity is drawn into the complications of these observations as the complementary phenomenon to deception. Quote, "Nothing is simple anymore," end quote. Not even stupidity. That is perhaps the saddest triumph of enlightenment. In the light of reflection, the phenomenon of stupidity is torn from everyday thinking and illuminated theoretically. When this is done, the phenomenon proves to be a special case of subjugation and defiance. Deception alone would be nothing without a highly explosive readiness to be deceived in the so-called victim. The early modern Narrenschiff, Ship of Fools, of Sebastian Brandt, 1494, already calls the structure by its name, Mundus vult decipi, ergo decipiatur. The world wants to be deceived, therefore it should be deceived. Thus the theory of the fool and the deceived recognizes in them from the beginning an independent, active element, vult. The stultitia is not innocent, but contains an aspect of false naivety that clings to those who let themselves be made fools of. This precipitates aggressive laughter. Mocking laughter is a ferment of the European tradition of satire. In this century, the scandalous contrast between the norms of reason and enlightenment and the unreasonableness of the human condition demands theoretical explanations that stretch out beyond satirical wisdom. Here, psychoanalysis has without doubt achieved a great deal of penetrating the phenomenon of stupidity psychogenetically and psychodynamically. It too spins out the motif of wanting to be deceived. It discovers that there certainly is subjective sense in being stupid. A telling documentation of the nascent theorizing about stupidity is provided by a small humorous book by Charles Robert Richet, 1850 to 1935, a world-renowned physiologist and psychologist who had also distinguished himself as a writer of fables. As a Nobel Prize winner, he was one of the leading lights of the French learned world. Written in 1921, his tract was immediately translated into German. Der Mensch ist dumm. Satirische Bilder aus der Geschichte der menschlichen Dummheiten. The human being is stupid. Satirical pictures from the history of human stupidities. 1922. Richet is a classic representative of the bourgeois type of learned scholar of the Third Republic, radical rationalist, an enlightener and teacher of biting stringency and gentle humanity. One may surmise that with this work from his later years, he wanted to express his outrage at the devastations of humanity from the First World War. It is written in a bourgeois dignitary's style that, in a very French way, walks the tightrope between clarity and platitude. Under such conditions, naive cynicisms of all kinds flourish, for whose understanding a glance at the author's medical background is useful. In addition, Richet, at the end of his life's work, no longer feels the compulsion to be more brilliant than the occasion demands. What he relates about the First World War sounds as cynical as it is helpless. Quoting that book from pages 48 and 51, Thus I do not decry war for the sake of the dead and the ruins. The newborn will replace the dead, and through them the ruins will be built up again. The trees grow once again, and the harvests come again. But there is an uncanny reality that nothing can extinguish in the eternity of time. The mourning. 15 million dead. Well, that is no great misfortune, at least for these dead, for the dead no longer suffer. 15 million dead are replenished by 15 million births. But hundreds of millions of unhappy people, hundreds of millions of martyrs for whom every joy has dried up forever. That is something. Cynicism appears here as a form of the labour of mourning. It mirrors the horror of a gentle rationalist at a human society that is incapable of conceiving of war as a cardinal stupidity. Richer proclaims that he is ashamed to belong to this low species, humanity. One can no longer speak of the Homo sapiens in the Linnaean system. Richer replaces the expression with a new anthropological classification, Homo stultus. Animals, after all, are far more clever. An ape can learn to play cricket like an Englishman, but the human being does not understand, quote, that peace deserves priority over war, end quote, from page 62. In the feelings of bitterness, the old man now unfurls the picture scroll of human stupidities. The picture scroll of human stupidities. Mutilation, circumcision, castration, celibacy, royal cults, sycophancy, subjugation, class society, drugs, alcoholism, tobacco, fashion, jewels, war and armaments, superstition, bullfighting, the extinction of animal species, the destruction of forests, protective tariffs, sicknesses through negligence, and so on and so on. In this he indulges in a multitude of extreme insipidities in the notorious style of the 19th century, for which the other side, not entirely without justification, attacked him as a quote-unquote "inblightener," aufklärt, to say nothing of his racist vulgarities about the stupidity of the Negroes and the cultural worthlessness of the yellow and red races. It is fascinating to see how in this old scholar the language of ancient cynicism emerges as soon as he comes to the topic that provided the touchstone for wise teachings in antiquity: the relation of the wise person to dying. Like the ancient cynics and materialists, Richer teaches a sovereign indifference towards one's own death, no matter how much he also recognises the mourning of the death of loved ones. He classifies every kind of death cult as stupid and as superstitious alienation. The dead body, this quote-unquote earthly sack of maggots, page 125, does not deserve any honour. In classical manner, no matter how immediately inspired he is by Cynical and Stoic sources, Richer teaches an honourable death. He celebrates Socrates' death as the model of an end worthy of a human being. That is, a serene euthanasia in contrast to that tormenting dysthanasia to which doctors of the time subjected the dying. Quoting now page 125. As far as my own corpse is concerned, I herewith quite solemnly declare that it is to be thrown into the knacker's yard, burned, buried, or dissected. I don't care what happens to it, and I beseech my family not to worry themselves over it. This way of thinking, oriented towards antiquity, does not hide that Richer's writing too belongs to the modern twilight of stupidity, for it pinpoints precisely the dependence of stupidity on intelligence. Stupidity is an act of defiance, a refusal, a not wanting to be otherwise that advances parallel to enlightenment. Quoting page 13, wherever there is no reason at all, one cannot nevertheless be unreasonable. However, the more one is gifted with intelligence, the more one is inclined to drown in a sea of banalities. From the aphorisms of the novelist and psychoanalyst Ernst Weiss, von der Wollust der Dummheit, on the pleasure of stupidity, 1938, who is almost forgotten today, one can perceive an enriched echo of Richer's theses. where Richer still cites the mundus vult decipi in classical fashion, Weiss, following Nietzsche, speaks of a will to night. Translator's note: Wille zur Nacht, instead of Nietzsche's Wille zur Macht, as a universal regressive tendency to extinguish lights, to lie down flat, to be stupid. This is what psychologists of the masses have to take into account if they want to speak of fascism. In the eyes of the stupid, God is stupid. The people want God to be stupid. A God who understood chemistry and relativity physics would not be to their liking. Luther said Deus stultissimos. The word could come from Hitler if he had learned Latin.